Hi everyone. So in this video, what we are going to tackle is one thing that we last time did not really cover, which is one particular validation that I wanted to introduce, which is for this valid rental period. So last time we checked for that the starts at and ends at is actually not null and they are both in the future. But what we additionally want to check is that the start date is actually before the end date, because otherwise it's a little bit problematic to rent this particular item. And while doing that, probably we also need to refactor our validation tests, and I will show you in a second why this is going to happen. But let's start with the validation for valid rental period. So in the documentation from Jmix, there is one example actually of how to do that, and it's a little bit more complicated than just putting one annotation onto a field and then it magically validates itself. So here the problem is that we are actually acting with two fields. So in this example, what they have here is event date, and luckily this actually matches perfectly to our scenario here, where they have a start date and an end date. And what they want to check is basically if the start date is before the end date. So same situation as ours. And what you do in order to achieve that is you create an annotation, like a custom annotation, which they call here event date. And then they basically specify particular validation groups here. And then inside this annotation, so this is actually this class here, or this annotation interface, there is a constraint in which says by which class this annotation is actually verified. And then, it delegates here to this event date validator. And in this class, we will then actually go ahead and perform this check. So this means that then, in the usage, it can be just used like that. So that being said, I think we can actually start and take a look on how this works. So first of all, let's go to our order line, because here we have our ends at and starts at, and we have a little bit different data types and a little bit different names. So it will be Java 8 based date API. So yeah, this I think is the only really relevant change that we have to do here. And let's first of all import these groups here, and then we will create a class we will call valid rental period. And so since this one does not exist, let's just go ahead and create this annotation here. Can put it into a sub package called validation. And if we go back to our example, then we probably need to take over some of the stuff from there. And let's fix the imports. And here what we will say, so first of all, this one here, and then we are going to create a class which will then say valid rental period validator. So let's go ahead and create this particular class. It already implements this constraint validator, and here we also need to pass in some parameters. So first of all, it will be the annotation. This will be valid rental period, and then we have the class on where we act upon. In this case, this is event, because this one here is also of type event. So this will be our order line. And now we can go ahead and say implement this method. So let me just fix my spelling here, period validator. And so first of all, we have to, there's two methods. First of all, it is checking if this is valid method. This is actually the one where we actually perform our business logic. yeah, so for now we can just implement that. There is one other thing, if I recall correctly, which is called initialize. So there you have some other hook method where you can prepare some stuff before the validation or something. Right now we don't really need that, because what we get in here is our order line, and this is actually everything that we need in order to decide. So let me just call that event for now, so that we don't have the problem anymore. And now we change it to order line, and then let's just go ahead and say ends at and starts at, and here we have starts at and ends at. And in this Java 8 API, there's a little bit different. So this is not called before, but this actually, I think, is before. Yeah, exactly. Yeah, and in case the order line is not present, then it will return it's not valid. In case either of those attributes are invalid, then it will also say not valid. And if those two conditions are met, then it will actually compare and say the start at attribute is actually before the order line ends at attribute. And if this is the case, then return true, otherwise return false. So with that in place, we now have our proper annotation here. And if we now go ahead and take a look at our order line validation test, which here is actually, I did something wrong in the renaming in the last test, so let me just fix that. So this is order line validation test, and if we now run that again, then most likely we will see some failing tests. And so there, probably there should be a couple of those. So first of all, here we had this situation where we said let's just see. Yeah, I think this one, where we said starts at is tomorrow and ends at is yesterday. So this is actually a real violation of our new constraint, that this should not happen. But then there are also other tests failing. So for example, if we go to this one here, yeah, so here what we see, I mean, we can also take a look at this one, it doesn't really matter. So why are these tests now failing? And this is because our check for that it only has one violation. So if we now say it ends at is null, then first of all, it will actually, have a violation because of this annotation here. And secondly, because in our validator, we check for the ends at is null, and then we also return false. So the way how we can fix that is probably, change our assertions here a little bit. And since we have a lot of those assertions here, and I already talked about it last time, and I mean, this is a little bit of boilerplate code for exactly basically doing the same thing every time. So what we can probably do is to say that we would like to just refactor that a little bit to have a little bit easier easier verification. So what we can do is to use this validation verification bean, and instead of having these validate methods that return a particular thing for the test case, we actually can go ahead and write, basically copy in this particular thing here, and then just under the hood check if the assertions are actually met or not. So let me just show you what I mean. What we can say is, for example, assert exactly one relation with, for example, and then what we pass in is the order line, and then the second thing is the ends at, and the third thing is not null. And this is basically everything that we do in this test case, and all the stuff we will do, as part of this implementation. And then you can see the test case gets a little bit cleaner. So you basically set up your data for this particular entity, and then you just say, I would like to assert exactly one violation, with these parameters. So let me go ahead and create this method here, and it should actually return void. Here we actually need type T, so let me just declare that here as well. This will be the entity, and then this will be the attribute, and the last string will be the error type, as we already have it in some previous methods here. So actually this is also wrong, so this should be entity, and here as well. So if I now copy this in here, then it changes a little bit, because we do not need this object anymore, because we are already in this object. So what we can do here is first say validations, just interact with the validations, and then check for the size, and afterwards, check at this particular attribute, and then we look for this particular error message. And if I now run this once again, then it did not change anything yet, because we have not actually changed the logic. So this already helps in case there's one violation. So for example, if we have this one here, so this is the empty one, let's see. So for this one, for example, we can surely already use that. Let's just copy our new API here. So this will be on attribute order and then not null. So if we run this now once again, then this should also work. And the same thing we can do for this particular test here, where we actually check on the stock item of being null. So if I run all these tests, then you see that still the amount of failing tests didn't change. So this refactoring actually works. And so let's then now think about on how to achieve these other things. So here we are basically having two violations, as we already discussed before. So how we can fix that now? If we go ahead here, and the method I called assert exactly one violation. But what we can also say is that we would at least would like to have another method which we call assert one violation with. And in this assertion, we do not really check on if it's if the exact amount of violations are present that we expect, but only that at least one violation is there that matches our criteria. So if I go ahead here and just create this new method here and remove this exactly, then okay, so let me just go ahead here into our new method and take a look where this is called. So this is our particular test case, and here we are checking for the ends at and the future or present annotation. So let's now go ahead and check if this is actually working or not. I would assume not, because we have not changed the implementation. We just copied it over. But what we can already do is adjust our usage of it. So here this will be the same thing, but just for starts at. And then we have it here where the start set is null. And with that, we have basically now refactored all of our tests, except for the fact that they are still broken. So normally it's a little bit easier if we try to keep our test a little bit faster green and then refactor while they are green. For now, I just decided to do otherwise, but this is just some common thing. But let's now actually take a look on how we can change that. So first of all, we right here check on the has size, and this is not what we want anymore, but what we want is there are a couple of other methods, and there is one which says has size greater than or equal to, and here we can say that it should basically at least have one violation. And if we now go ahead and run this once again, then this should pass, but still we have two other assertions, and this is potentially going to fail, because what we do here is that we just pick the first one and then just assert on this first one. But depending on which items comes first in this list, it actually will either work or not. So this means that what we can additionally do is, okay, so this is a Fluent API, so we can just do additional assertions here. Instead of checking on one particular item, we can say any match. And here we have to pass in one particular predicate, and then yeah, it will basically check if one of the items in this list is actually matching this criteria, and then it will say yes, otherwise it will write an assertion error. So this means if we now here, so this is a lambda that we have to implement, and then we can get in this validation result, because it basically iterates over these validations. And here we can say validation result get attribute equals to the attribute. And so either we can immediately put it in here as a second step for checking on the error type, or yeah, basically, actually we have to do that because both of those criteria need to be met in the same object. So this means we would say and validation result get error type equals, then we have to actually call this method here. And perhaps now, since it's a little bit more complicated, we can create a method out of that, which we will say validation or yeah. So here right now we actually have to pass in this validation result, but since we have this class here at hand, we can also just do it a little bit differently. So just copy this here once again, and then we say matches attribute, and this would be the error type. And here we can just create a method here. And then we would basically do like this. And since right now we don't have this validation message here in place, because it comes from this outer string, so let's just double check on where we use that additionally. Yeah, so right now we use that actually in a couple of tests still, but within this particular so we have it here. Okay, so probably the easiest would be that instead of passing in this error type, we can also pass in the result of this validation message. So in this case, then we would say let's just go ahead and find the spot where we actually invoke that. So this will be validation message of error type. And yeah, then we can directly use this error type as an attribute or as a comparison operator here. So okay, so that's I think already enough. Let's run our validation test here once again, because now we are checking only that it has a particular, at least a particular size, and that there's a match on one particular validation result. Okay, so this already looks better. So the majority of the tests are not failing anymore. So let's take a look at this one here. I think we just forgot to remove this extract here, because here we have the same situation. The order line end date is not present, and then normally there will be 2 violations occurring, and now we change it to assert 1 violation with, and then it should actually be done. Okay, so now our tests are green once again, and what we then probably also need here is that our new test case, or this is the test case actually where we have like, some start date which is after the end date. So probably let's write a dedicated test case for describing our desired behavior. Yeah, and here we can actually put this okay. So yeah, what we can do here is to say this ends at is, for example, tomorrow, and the starts at is in 2 days. And with that, it actually should, right now it should fail, because the ends at is actually in the future. So this should actually not cause any problem anymore. But what we now need to do is to check on our new error type. So let's actually go probably ahead here and take a look at the violations that occur. And for that, I probably should just run this one particular test. Okay, so here now what we see is we have 1 violation, and this message template here is something that we have not yet set. So probably let's actually implement that as well. Because right now, if we look at our period, then this is just this message here, and this, just a hard-coded string. So, and if we, for example, look at the future or present annotation, then hopefully we see something else exactly. So we see this one. So actually we can do yeah, some similar thing there. So with that in place, we should now be able to check on this particular error type here once again, because if you remember, like in this assertion, we basically build up this constraint message here. So let's run that once again, or even we can do it even without the debugger and see if this now works. Okay, it still did not work, so let's debug that here once again. So what we see here is that we put the attribute to ends at, and this is actually not 100% clear on which attribute this actually that actually should occur, because it's not a direct, I mean, it belongs to 2 attributes actually and not just one, this violation. So let's go ahead in our violations and take a look on what the result actually looks like. So we check on this attribute. So let's actually go ahead here. And this is verifying on the property path. And if we look at the property path, then this is actually, not, there is no property, because it basically, just doesn't match any particular attribute. So probably for these kinds of tests or these kinds of verification, it's better if we create another one where we will just not have an attribute. So I will just go ahead here and create another variant of this method where we don't check on a particular attribute, and then we also need to have another matches method where we do not check on the attribute and just check on the error type. Okay, so if we run that here once again, then we can actually take a look if this works or not. Okay, so the test now actually works, because we have relaxed our matcher here. We only check on the validation message and not on the attribute anymore. So this is exactly what we want. Yeah, and with that, I think we are almost done with this video. We have now an additional validation in place that those 2 dates should be in a semantically order. And if this is not the case, then we will actually raise 1 violation. Okay, I think with that we have now basically create the validation for a valid rental period and also refactor our validation tests. I will probably go ahead and clean this up for the other tests as well. So this is something that probably not worth looking at, because it's just 5 additional test classes that we have for the order and the customer and so on. Yeah, but the pattern will be exactly the same. And then the 2 remaining ones that we have is to create the instance name test for the order, and then also create a storage test. I think this we will cover in another video. All right, thank you very much for watching, and see you next time.